Welcome to the overnight section of From Day One. We are back with more exorcisms with Art Bell and David Jacobs. So without no further ado, Art and David, take it away.
Anyway, so you have to have that constant sense of people having the same experiences over and over and over again, no matter who they are. That's very important because it validates everybody. In 2003, I began to hear something I never heard before.
And
that's unusual. And what it was a guy who I had talked with. I had 4 sessions with him, I think it was. His name was Bernard, and he told me that he had just remembered that he had a friend. And this was a really good friend of his named Eric. And Eric was a great friend of his. It was his best friend. And, he just never remembered him before. But yeah, Eric, yeah. And he didn't know what Eric's last name was. And he didn't know where Eric was from, or whether he was married, or whether he worked, or anything like that. But he'd known Eric, and Eric was really a good friend of his. And so, which, of course, makes no sense whatsoever. It's senseless. You can't have your best friend and not know his last name.
Right.
So we did a session on that, and we did various sessions. He got on fishing trips with this guy. They've been to restaurants. They've been visiting here and there. They've been in other countries together. This is not evidence. All these accounts from Bernard are not evidence unless somebody else begins to say the same thing without knowing about what Bernard was saying. And then somebody else did fairly quickly.
Really?
Then another person did, then another person, then another person, then another person, then another person, then another person.
Wow.
And I realized one person I worked with since 1993, I'd worked with for 10 years, and one person I worked with since 1987. And they began to tell me these stories about going places with hybrids and teaching them how to dress and this and that. And I knew this was the change. It was on us now. This is it.
Okay, a number of questions pop to mind. For example, if you were staring at a hybrid, would you know it?
No, you would not know it. And if you knew it, that person wouldn't be there.
Well, then that would suggest a more subtle merging of the species, if you want to put it that way, because they certainly look more human than they do anything else, right?
I call them hybrids. They are bred to look human, and not just human, but average human that will not stand out, that blends in, period. If they're too tall, not a chance of coming down here. If they got too big a nose, not going to happen. If their eyes are too big, nope. They have to look absolutely average.
Normal.
Now, here's the thing. All gray aliens and all hybrids and all hybrids and all other beings on board the object have one interesting trait. They can control people's minds neurologically and make them do or think or see anything that they want them to do or see or think or see. And we can't do that to them. That is an astoundingly huge difference.
It is.
It's a difference between species. It makes us a second-class species and them a first-class species. It's not like they're just kissing cousins who live off and somewhere else and they're coming to visit us and all the rest of that stuff. That's not what this is about. You got to remember, this is a global phenomenon. This goes around the world. It does not matter where a person is born or what their life was like or what their educational level is or what their intelligence level is or their geographic area or anything. They all say the same thing in terms of the abduction phenomenon.
All right. These are remarkable allegations you're making. Now, I've got a zillion questions. Hybrids. Okay, we'll call them that. Hybrids. Humans with the ability to control others' minds. Are they aware of that ability?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because they rely on abductees to teach them how to live in society. They rely on them on board the object when they're young, and when they get ready to move into apartments, they rely on them to teach them how to furnish the apartment, to teach them how to go shopping, to teach them how to drive, to teach them about relationships, to teach them everything. And abductees do that, and then they forget immediately, just like an abduction, what has happened. And they're completely controlled. They can't say, "I'll be back in a minute. Just hang on there for a second," and then come out of a closet carrying a 9mm Glock. They can't do that. So,
all right, that's a gigantic difference between human beings and hybrids, as you call them. Is there any other difference that you're aware of?
No. They are human, except their neurological abilities are impossible to imagine, and they are completely controlling of humans.
Well, that would make them essentially a master race.
You said it. I didn't.
I did. I'm not afraid to say it. If you have a group of people able to control the minds and the thoughts and even the visions of others, that is a super race.
Exactly right. I just don't see a wonderful, fulfilling phenomenon that is happening to us that we're begging to hurry up and come here. I just don't see that. It's not what people tell me. Okay, I'll take it. That's not what people tell me. I've run little experiments with people. I tell them, "No, I don't want you to tell me anything bad. I don't want to hear anything bad. I don't want to hear anything that I don't like. You understand?
Professor,
do not
hold
tell
on.
me anything bad," I will say to them, and do hypnosis,
right.
And they just couldn't care less.
Hold on, Professor. Hold on. We've got a break. We'll be right back. This is Art Bell and Midnight.
And again, we'll return to him as soon as we do come back from break. Oh, we do have a level up. Yes, please. Eden's now 4-star. Team 4-star. All three of the Super Titans are now at 4.
The U.S. and Canada only. Use Skype with a headset mic if on a computer. And NITD 55. That's NITD 55.
That was not an internet problem. That was my once-a-night problem with Ross. At least that one wasn't. All right. What we're hearing tonight is astounding from Professor Jacobs. Professor David Jacobs is just, it's scary. It's astounding and it's scary. I mean, what have we got here? What are we talking about? We're talking about, if you listen very carefully, we're talking about a master race of people who look just like us, who are fully aware. He calls them hybrids, fully aware they have the ability to control others' minds. So we not only have a master race, but we have an invasion. And that's what it is, Professor. Again, my word, it's an invasion.
Well, I use the word takeover. I use the word invasion. I guess I use those words in the book as well. The book's title is Walking Among Us, and I explain in the book that when people asked me some years back, do you think they're walking among us, that was my favorite question to answer. I love that question because I got to say, absolutely not. There's not. That's ridiculous. Nobody's walking among us. That's just not happening. And I felt good then because I could say no. You know what I mean? And I was sane and all that. Then after a while, I realized it was my least favorite question. I began to hate that question because I had to say, well, I had to beat around the bush. Well, maybe it's possible. Anything can happen. And now I just say yes.
Well, I mean, we have to immediately find these people, tie them to a 2x4, put kindling at their feet, and burn them.
Well, that's one way of dealing with it. Now,
I'm being facetious, folks.
Oh, I know. So am I. But But the problem is that since they can control other humans, if you come towards them with your rope and all you're going to do is say, "Oh, this is a really good person. I'll just put this rope around myself and put some lighter fluid out, and I'll just burn myself up."
That's a good point.
It's a difficult situation all the way around. And what this book is about is the processes and the procedures and the bureaucracy involved with settling people down on Earth and letting them blend in. And how do they do that? And what do they do? And how is that accomplished? And it's a whole world unto itself.
Okay, these are amazing things you're saying. And so I've got to ask you, how do you know that these abilities you speak of are for real? How do you know this?
Well, like I said, one woman who I've known who I've been working with since 1987. I've known her for decades practically,
Right.
and she's a wonderful person. She's just honest. She's an honest person. Everybody I've worked with who's in this book has been an absolutely rigorously honest person. And here's something else that people have to understand. People come to me who are high-functioning people, who I mentioned before, university professors and
Yes.
psychiatrists and psychologists and medical professionals and all that. And they're coming to me to examine their abduction experiences, knowing full well that if anybody finds out about this, it would destroy their careers. Absolutely, positively, without question.
Mm-hmm.
All a psychiatrist has to say is that I've been abducted by little gray men from another planet. That's all they got to say if they don't ever want to work in the mental health field again.
That's right.
And so therefore, there's no reason whatsoever to come to me at all and take the chance that I myself am some sort of goofball who's gonna use their real names and send it right to the New York Times or something like that. But they're taking that chance because they desperately will want to know what has been happening to them throughout the course of their entire lives, and they can't figure it out, and they need to have help by a person who can help them figure it out. There's no reason to do that if they're faking it. They never tell anybody afterwards. They never write a letter, an article saying, "See, I faked it. It's great. See, this guy Jacobs, he's a jerk. He fell for it." That just doesn't happen.
All right. But let me be, again, I want to be straight on this. So you're basing your claims on the fact that you have been told this by person after person after person under hypnosis that has been abducted or complains that they were abducted, right?
They were abductees, and they've been abductees in childhood, yes.
All right. Am I to assume that, for example, there was a minor, I guess what we would consider a minor genetic modification made to what turned out to be these hybrids with this ability that we've been talking about, to control thoughts?
Well, there is a spectrum of hybridization. It's probably a smooth curve, but what I've done is bifurcated it into different types, just to sort of get a handle on it. Like, for example, hybrids who look half alien and half human and really look weird, they have specific tasks on board a UFO. They usually take care of babies and very small children, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ones that have tasks as well, who would not be able to fit in here, and they're just part of the program. What we're looking at is a massive global program of hybridization that's going on. The ones that are moving in, though, are the culmination of the program, of the actual physiology of the program. Now comes the social context, which is moving in. The thing about the hybrids is that they are 100% loyal to the ones above, as they call them, which means the ones who are calling the shots, who are in fact, and here comes controversy, the insect-looking ones. I call them insectoids. They are the ones who are in control and calling the shots. They're the ones who tell other people what to do. They give orders. They don't take orders.
All right. I might as well stick my neck out and ask, since you've determined all of this, have you determined what their motivation is, what they intend to do with these hybrids?
No. How's that?
Well, it's a good flat answer.
Right. We don't know the motivation. In other words, we don't know the ultimate why question. Why are now? I'm projecting this ahead. I'm calling this global acquisition. I hate to say it, but this is. You have to remember, this is a global phenomenon. It's not happening. If I found it in my corner of southeastern Pennsylvania, it's not possible that this is where they were setting down the first hybrids to blend into the society. It's just not possible. If I found it here, it's happening everywhere. And so, the chances are so much against it. So it's happening everywhere, and that includes Pakistan and Japan and Korea and all through Latin America and all through Europe, of course. And that's what that means. I think it seems to me. I'm extrapolating here. So the question is, well, why are they doing this? What is this all about? If I call it global acquisition, maybe I'm wrong. Why are they doing this? And we don't know the answer to that. Now, the interesting thing about not knowing the answer is that this is a phenomenon. The abduction phenomenon is either psychological or it's happening. There's nothing in the middle. With UFO sightings, there's plenty of middle. You see something up there, everybody sees something up there, and it's not a UFO. They think it's a UFO, they reported an investigation, and it's not a UFO, it's a plane, it's a blimp, it's a cloud, it's whatever.
Yeah.
And with this phenomenon, it's either psychological or it's happening. There's no way you can explain it in another way. It's not sexual abuse in childhood, which is nonsensical, and has no science behind it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, though, that if this were psychological, they would make up the why, just like they're making everything else up. What's to stop them from making up why? Because they want to, play bowling ball with the planets or something like that, or because they're protecting us from ourselves, and it's around the world, and they have to do it because they're going to wreck other planets or whatever, And so, but the insect-like ones simply do not tell their motivations. And when sometimes people ask hybrids, why are you here? Well, what's the point of all this? They'll say, my job, my task is to live here. That's all I know. That's all they know. They don't know, in other words.
God. What you have said is so astounding. A master race that is capable of mind control. We don't yet know their motives, but they're probably ultimately not good. I mean, they've got something they want to do. I have not yet seen the hybrids, as it were, improve our lives in any way.
Well, I think it's still fairly early on, and before we begin to understand that something else is going on. But here's one generalization you can make about the aliens, and this is a large generalization, but it's probably accurate. Doing this, planetary acquisition as I call it, in some way benefits them.
Sure.
It's got to be good for them. It can't be bad for them. They wouldn't be putting in almost a century's worth of time and energy into this.
For nothing.
It was for nothing, right. That brings me to another point. Time. How old are these insectoids? How old are they? How do they age? Now, we have things, our ages are relatively short-lived. I mean, they're not like some, grasshoppers or whatever that live for one day. They fly up in the air and they 12 hours of lifespan. But we have trees that are 3,000 years old, 5,000 years old, and some people say that bacteria can last that long and even longer. But for let's just say 100 years long for a human, I wish. That's not very long. It's possible that they have very, very, very long lifespans, and therefore time is relatively meaningless for them. So they can continue on kind of like forever and ever doing this until they have judged that that's enough, and now they can control the planet or do whatever they want to do. I don't think that that's the case, but I do think that time is on their side, and so we might still have a long wait before there's any kind of serious sense that something is in the society. But once again, this is speculative. It's guesswork, and the reason it's guesswork is because abductees don't know.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to back up and try to, for example, do you have any proof, or have you seen hybrids control the thoughts of others?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I have accounts of that. Yeah, I have simple accounts of that in the book. For example, now I'm going to say something crazy. Everything else I said wasn't crazy. Now I'm going to say something crazy.
Okay.
Bernard took his hybrid to a baseball game. That was one of the things he told me. He took a hybrid to he's a huge Baltimore Orioles fan, and he would drive down from New Jersey all the way down to Baltimore to see his dear and beloved Orioles. And he always went with one of his children. He had season tickets, and so not for every game, but weekends or whatever. And he told me that he decided that he came for a session, and he told me that he down at a game a couple weeks ago, and he went down alone this time. I said, alone? Oh, so you didn't go down with one of your kids? And he hedged a little bit about that, trying to remember, and he said, no, he didn't think he did. I said, well, do you still have your extra ticket? No, he doesn't have the ticket. I said, well, do you remember what you did with the ticket? They just stand out in front of the stadium saying, ticket here,
yeah.
got a ticket, he couldn't remember whether he did that or not. Now, this was only 2 weeks ago. I said, this is what's called logical questioning. I said, well, was there somebody sitting in the seat next to you, or was it empty when you got there? He couldn't remember that either.
Wow.
So we did a session on this. Now, this is a guy in his 50s who's a businessman. We did a session on. He owned his own company. We did a session on this, and he was driving down, and he went off onto off 95, the major highway here on the East Coast, and stopped on a side street, and there was his friend Eric waiting for him. I got in the car. And the first thing and they were going to the ball game, and the first thing he noticed was that Eric was wearing a jacket, I guess it was, that said Toronto Blue Jays on it. And so Bernard said, well, you can't do that because we're going to an Orioles game, and you got to get with the spirit of the crowd and so forth. And so they decided, when they got to Camden Yard, they went into a store that sold Orioles paraphernalia, and he went in. The hybrid, the Eric, and he picked out a shirt that said Orioles on it, and he walked past held the shirt in his hand or whatever it was. He walked past the cashier, who he nodded to, and she nodded to him with a smile, and he walked out of the store with the shirt.
A knowing smile, no doubt.
Yeah, but he paid nothing for it, and she didn't say, hey, wait a minute.
I understand. Yes.
He had her controlled.
Yes.
And the other people in the store, too, who might have seen it.
All right. Professor, do you have any way of even guessing at how many of these hybrids walk among us?
I don't, but I know it's one hell of a lot. The thing is, we know that there's thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands and almost certainly millions of people who are hybrids in the United States. I'm sorry, who are abductees in the United States. We know this roughly from our Roper poll, and both Hopkins and I have gotten thousands and thousands of letters and emails from abductees. I get them every day of my life from around the country and around the world, and so there's a lot of them. But when hybrids come down and are attached to an abductee to help them move in and say that you have to have towels and a shower and stuff like that, that they're also seeing other abductees. It's not like they're waiting a couple of days for things to settle down or whatever. They're seeing other abductees as well. So each hybrid has a group of abductees who help them, and we know therefore that there's a lot of abductees, but there's also one hell of a lot of hybrids being put into place. One of my people showed me, took a photograph of an apartment complex where they were moving in at a place near Scranton, Pennsylvania. I drove up there and drove around, and all I got was very suspicious looks from the locals who lived there. It was not exactly in a high crime area, but it was not a palatial mansion area either, and I couldn't tell. I had it in my mind that one of these days I get some political paraphernalia, and I knock on people's doors, handing out pamphlets for local candidates somewhere, and I'd have a hidden camera on my body, and they'd open the door and they say, "No, I don't know what that is. Go away." But I'd have a picture of each person and maybe get the abductee to identify. But that sort of never came to fruition.
All right. Well, some of these, Professor, may be my words, but when you begin talking about hybrids, creatures that are only part human, the part we see mostly, that are capable of wait a minute, that are capable of mind control.
Yep.
All this orchestrated by an insect-like race of aliens,
right,
that are creating a master race and are conducting an invasion of Earth. And, it's nothing short of that, what you're saying. You may not use the words. It may be me that used the words, but I'm just putting together what you're saying. You're going to scare the holy you-know-what out of people.
I've already done that to myself. I mean, there's nothing that isn't scary about this. I look at I have two young men who are my sons, and I look at the future for them, and I think, oh my God, what's going to happen to them? I wish I was on the other side where everything was loving and wonderful and benevolent and environmentally friendly, but that's just not what people have told me. As I was saying to you before, I would tell people I don't want to hear anything bad, and then I would order them, do not tell me anything bad. And then do hypnosis with them, and then they just tell me the same thing. They couldn't care less what I say. All they remember is what's happening to them. They don't. It's not my feelings they're trying to deal with. They're trying to deal with the reality of what's happening to them.
Well, I remember, Professor, a lot of movies that have dealt with invasions have featured people like yourself who have realized what's going on and have tried to tell people what's going on, and generally have been roundly ostracized by those that you've told. For example, let me ask: have you run this by any of your colleagues?
Well, here's the thing about academics. When it comes to UFO abductions,
yes.
Well, let me start with scientists first.
Okay.
Scientists have discovered something that goes faster than the speed of light. And what that something is the talk about abductions. It happens faster than the speed of light. It's a miracle. And academics in general are pretty much like that. I've only had two people in teaching at Temple from 1975 to 2011. I only had two people who ever engaged me in conversation about the subject. Both of them were in the liberal arts. Not a single scientist, not a physicist, an astronomer, a chemist, not a single scientist at Temple University in 37 years I was there, or whatever it was, asked me, Jacobs, what the hell is all this about? What's going on? What's the matter with you? Are you nuts? Not a single person said that to me. Not one ever.
Yes, but how many have said, my God, Professor, you're right. What do we do?
No, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. You have to remember, I received more publicity at Temple University to everybody's embarrassment than any other person outside of the sports program. And yet it did not pry loose one scientist to walk over to my office and say, what kind of an idiot am I? You know, I would be glad to answer that question. I'm an enormous idiot, of course. But the fact is, though, that is generally speaking the entire scientific community in the United States, with the exception of those scientists who got interested in UFOs and stuck with them years and years and years ago, most of whom are now, like me, long in the tooth.
Right. But I mean, even among UFO researchers and paranormal investigators, what you're saying is really uber. I'm not sure what to say. It's
over the top, so to speak.
Yes, over the top, so to speak. Because there has got to be some sort of dastardly motive to this. You would not go through what these creatures are going through to put these kind of hybrids on Earth, unless it was because, as you pointed out, we have relatively short lifespans. So are they building toward generations? Are they trying to get millions of them here, or a certain number before they do whatever they're going to do?
Yeah, don't know that. But my guess is yes, they've got to get a certain number here before they can do what they're going to do.
Okay, but that would have to occur within a certain lifetime. Or have you determined that hybrids, when they breed, either with other hybrids or humans, end up producing more hybrids? What happens there?
They end up producing more hybrids, probably, and that depends on what happens. I do know that when hybrids have had intercourse with abductees, they then get pregnant, and the fetus is removed about 10 or between 9 and 11 weeks, just as if they had an embryo inserted in them, but it bypasses some of the procedures on tables. However, this is different, and so we don't know yet whether or not hybrids can, in fact, have children with abductees. We don't know that. We do know that they are not to have sexual relations with female hybrids.
Oh, how do we know? How do we know that?
The hybrids have said this, that they have to, they stick with regular humans because otherwise I guess they think that it's just not spreading out the phenomenon enough in some way. I don't know. But
hitting on a female hybrid would be useless.
Yeah. What's the point? The point is you want to spread your seed, so to speak.
Right. Well, she doesn't want a thing to do with it, though, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said she wouldn't want a thing to do with it.
If by she you mean the female hybrids, right. No. They have to mate with humans. They have to have intercourse with humans. And males have to have with human females.
Okay, so you're saying that hybrids may not mate.
They may not mate. That is correct. They are told they cannot mate. They should not mate. They are not supposed to, and they follow orders. They're really good at following orders.
Okay, that would make sense. If you're trying to propagate quickly, you would only want them to mate with a human. My God.
Yes, and the question then is, will they have a watered-down hybrid that is born, or would they just take out the hybrid fetus on board a UFO eventually and put it in a tank and just go through the standard procedures? We don't know that, because as far as I know, with the women whom I've worked with, they have not reported feeling pregnant as a result of hybrids.
All right.
I don't think. I'm thinking of maybe one exception.
Professor, hold on. This is such incredible stuff. I mean, if everything we're hearing right now is true, then surely we are at, right? And if not, we ought to be. Something else for the military-industrial complex to get busy with. I'm Art Bell. This is Midnight in the Desert. Holy mackerel.
And will return once they do return from their audio bumper. Sorry about the technical difficulties we had just a little while ago.
The speed of light in the darkness. This is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Now, here's Art.
You know, I've been doing talk radio now for decades, right? Radio for all my life. And in all my life, and in all those decades, I don't think that I have ever heard anything like what I'm hearing tonight from Professor David Jacobs. Boiled down to this, it seems to be the many, many abductions that he has studied over the years, and it is many, 1,150 over 1,150, involve sperm and eggs. I'm sort of summing up here so that you all are with me, I hope. And that what's being produced, one way or the other with this, is what he calls hybrids. Hybrid humans, hybrids, he calls them. This would be a race of people who look just like us, indistinguishable from a normal human. In fact, normal to the point of almost being odd. In other words, no outstanding features that would mark them or let us recognize them in any way. So the close-in norm, right? The normal human. They're capable of mind control. This is all being done by a race of aliens that are insectoid. What it amounts to, according to the professor, is an invasion of Earth. This is an invasion of Earth. And it's underway. It's apparently well underway. So, Professor, do you have any indication of when this aspect of it, the hybrids, began?
Well, like I said, I started hearing about it in 2003. It's almost impossible for me to have heard about it first, as just after it happened. It probably happened. It started happening some years beforehand, and I didn't realize it. But the people who I had been working with weren't talking about it, and then suddenly, a bunch of them started talking about it. So I knew that it had reached here in the southeastern Pennsylvania area, but it had to have been beforehand, and it had to have been at other places as well. So we don't really know that, because once again, we get all our information from abductees, and they don't know that either.
Right.
And the hybrids don't know that. They don't have a need to know that. What difference does it make to them?
Okay, Professor, is there any way let us say, for yourself, most familiar with them, to recognize a hybrid if you saw one? And if so, how?
No, there is not. So if you see a weird person who looks weird, has big eyes, is strange, and talks weird,
they'd be okay.
Yeah, he's just a weird guy, that's all.
So all these people would appear abnormally normal. You can put it that way.
So to speak.
Yeah. All right. I get questions, Professor, as we go on with the program. Chris in Madison, Wisconsin asks a pretty interesting question. Can hybrids read our minds?
Yes, they can. They can tell what you're thinking. They have to stare at you. They can tell what you're thinking. Now, having said that, it's not as clear cut as you might think. It is possible for abductees to hide things in their mind. How they do this, I don't know, and have other thoughts come to the forefront, which they will be glad to have the person know. But in general, yes, they can read. I'm going into the fine points here, but in general, they can read people's minds. They talk telepathically, which automatically gives them entree, and they can do other. I won't even go into it. They can do other things. They can stare at people from a distance of an inch or so right into their eyes, just like gray aliens do routinely for humans that we've known about since I wrote my book Secret Life back in '92, and they can do that also, and they can dig deeper, and they can see what a person was doing, and they can do most of the things neurologically that gray aliens can do.
You know, I'm actually sitting here in shock, and I imagine a lot of people sitting and listening to this are in shock right now, or they're saying, "Oh, this guy's nuts."
Yeah, well, that's probably all true, including the last part. But the thing is that in my 1998 book, The Change, it sort of said that this was going to happen. Not all the details, but there was going to be this change. Soon they would all be together, and everybody would know his place, and all that sort of stuff. And so there was a harbinger of it years and years and years ago. And when I wrote Secret Life, my first book in 1992, my whole mindset was different, because I thought at that time that they were here to experiment on us, that they were interested in us, that they were learning about us and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of kept that mental set in my mind all the way through the book. But even then, they were staring into people's eyes, and they were creating hybrids, and people had and when we go back to 1981 with Bud Hopkins' Missing Time,
right?
You know, he coined the phrase, the word hybrid for them,
right?
And so it keeps going back and back and back.
But Professor, when did it become apparent to you that what we were facing was actually an invasion? It's a hard word, invasion.
Well, when I figured it was probably going to be something like that, but I didn't talk that much about it because I didn't know in the threat. But when Bernard came in, and then other people started to tell me the same story, then I began to think, this is not just coming in here and looking around and trying to figure out how things work. This was I began to expand my vision a little bit to the global quality of this, and also to the workforce involved, and that's a whole other story, and to everything else that's going on, and absolutely everything pointed to a takeover of some sort. Mm-hmm. I mean, there has to be, if they're going to live here, as you said before, they will be the master race. But it's not even a race; it's a species. It's like chimpanzees and humans. It's two different species, even though chimps are real smart.
Okay, so one would wonder, for example, I'm wondering, would their motive be to slowly increase their numbers until they can essentially take over, or would their motive be to simply continue doing it until the job is complete and we're all changed? Yeah,
and I don't think it will advance that far. I don't think you have to have everybody on Earth being a part of the game, so to speak, part of the hybrid world. I think that there has to be my guess is, now once again, I'm just speculating, but my guess is that they'll reach a critical mass at one point when they can control just about everybody, and that's all they need.
Oh, that would be all they would need. And it would be indeed a takeover. And at that point, one has to wonder what use they would have for those of us not part of it.
That's something that I have thought about. A couple of people have said that there will be a group of humans who are left over as a breeding stock in case something goes wrong with parts of the program or whatever. But it hasn't been said by enough people for me to think that this is what's going to happen, and so I'm unsure of that. But it could be. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't see any flaws in it. It's fine. Except, of course, that the whole thing is criminal. But the fact is, though, that once again, we just don't know the future.
Maybe you might even want to call it a war crime, actually.
Whatever it is, it ain't good.
War crime fits it just fine, actually, because this is, as you have described it, an invasion, which makes it a war, unless you just want to let it happen.
Right. It's an invasion. I'm not sure if we could actually reject it or put up a defense to it. So I don't know if it's a war. Now, there's a guy named Mike Mencken. Mike Mencken is a really good man, and what he does is he's figured out that if they're going to control us telepathically on board a UFO or to abduct us or whatever, which they do, of course, why not put the head in a person's head in a helmet or something, or try to stop whatever energy is going into whatever is going out of our brains and into their brains and vice versa, and see if you can interrupt that. And so he makes these what looks like World War II aviation pilot hats, although he's got some sort of baseball type hats now and other hats that have a certain kind of filling in them, a plastic type of thing or whatever it is. That abductees say actually does prevent abductions. The problem is that you can't wear them 24/7. And so there's plenty of opportunities to be abducted anyway, but it gives people comfort and relief, at least for a certain time. Now, here's the situation. Mike is a good guy. He's a great guy, and I like him a lot. But what we need is a group of heavy-duty scientists who put their heads together and try to figure this thing out and try to see what kind of countermeasures we can come up with.
Professor, Tina in Oregon says, well, we're screwed. What a brilliant way to take over a planet. I wonder how many in power are hybrids.
Well, I don't think they've gotten to that point yet. I think it's much, much, much too early for that. Most of them have no idea what the name of the country is. They don't know. They never ask, and they seem to know nothing about politics. One thing that they are frightened of, and various people have told me this, is violence. But it's not violence in terms of war. It's violence in terms of having young hybrids picked on by violent humans, let's just say in a park or something.
I completely understand.
That concerns them. But one of the first things I noticed very, very early on when I was doing research for Secret Life is that when these beings talk with abductees on board a UFO, they never ask them questions that have to do with American organizations or institutions or political structure or anything like that. And I thought early on that's so odd. And then I realized the reason that they probably don't ask questions about that is because we will be living under their institutions or top-down governments or whatever it is.
Are there any indications at all, Professor, that they are making final plans to bring this to their logical, whatever their logical conclusion is. I guess the end of us in a way.
Yeah, I haven't heard that yet because the process of taking egg and sperm is still ongoing, and but I have heard something that I had not heard that I had heard before in bits and pieces, and I didn't pay much attention to it. But now I've heard it in much greater detail than ever before, and it's distressing. And it has to do with some abductees, not all, and not even the ones that are helping, not all the ones that are helping hybrids, but just some abductees who are being trained to do the work of hybrids and gray aliens. Stare deeply into people's eyes, make them do this, make them do that with their minds. Find people who live in another state through some sort of apparatus that they can look through, but still dealing with their minds, and teaching them basically how to be hybrids, even though they're not, and they don't want to have anything to do with this whatsoever, and they feel like that even when they're teaching children how to get dressed, they feel like they're traitors to the human race. There's this guilt that goes to them, even on board the object. And but this business of training hybrids with other hybrids who sit next to them, teach them how to do this, on how to stare into a person's eyes, how to make a person think for example, I have this as one of the examples, make a person think he's jumping off a cliff in a room, and force him to do that, even though he's scared to death and doesn't want to do it. And that is another abductee. And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put into the book that's even very, very, very routine. Getting abductees to stand up in another room when there's a wall between you and walk into the room that the one who's being trained to do this kind of stuff is standing in.
All right. Could they, for example, control another person to the point of causing that person to essentially take their own life, commit suicide?
I don't know, but I would not be surprised if they could do that. I don't know, because they got this one guy to think now this is a little bit more complicated, but to think he was jumping off a cliff. And they did not want him to go to the point of actually jumping off the cliff, because he would just fall to the floor, and he might, as the alien said, be damaged.
Well, it might be a great way to practice getting somebody to actually do that.
That's exactly what they were doing. They were just trying to strengthen the person's ability to control that other person, even to the point of jumping off a cliff.
I'm telling you, Professor, in all the years I've done talk radio, nobody has scared me the way you're scaring me tonight. You're really doing a job on me.
Yeah, well, it is frightening. There's no doubt about it. There's just nothing that's soothing about it. There's nothing that's calming about it. And once again, I don't have a stake in this. I wish it was calming and soothing. I would much rather hear that than what people are telling me.
All right. What about this thought? If what you're saying is true, it seems to me that your life would be in almost immediate danger.
That's going to be the subject of my third book, my last book, rather. My life was not in danger, but what happens is when abductees come to me and their friends, the aliens, find out about it, the first thing that the aliens do is try to stop them from talking to me. That is a breach. This is a clandestine phenomenon, and it's secretive, and it's extremely successful secretively. And so to breach this, to go ahead and tell people what they're doing is not good, and they try to get people to stop. And by and large, they do get people to stop. One time, years and years ago, I was doing a session. It was our 10th session with a guy. This guy had a PhD in mathematics. I was doing a session with him, and in the 10th session, he was telling me what's happening, and then suddenly he sat bolt upright. And he said, I shouldn't be telling you this. And he got up and he said goodbye, and then he walked out, and I never saw him again in a session. Now, they obviously had gotten to him saying, you're doing the wrong thing, you shouldn't be going there, you shouldn't be telling him that, and all that sort of stuff, and they got to him. And other people have done similar things. But this one woman was extremely resistant, and she kept talking to me and talking to me and talking to me. And they did all sorts of things to her, and they even have they have methods of violence that they use. And this has been reported to me by several different people, so I know that this is, and the methods are so somewhat off the wall that it's hard to well, it's not the first thing that would come to mind.
All right, Professor, would you hold on? We're coming up on a break, and I'm going to take a moment early just to say, my God, are you all listening to this? I'm going to open the lines. I really think you need to be able to ask questions. So our public line is area code 952-225-5278. That's 952-225-5278. Skype in North America, of course, MITD51. And in the rest of the world, MITD55. In all my years of doing talk radio, I have never, ever run into something quite like this. This really is frightening. And I must say, if you were thinking of devious ways to take over a species, it doesn't get much better than this. From the high desert, I'm Art Bell, and this is Midnight in the Desert.
And with that, we will leave them for tonight. We will pick up part 3 tomorrow for the finale. In the meantime, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us to those goals of the 5,000 views, 1,000 subscribers above Foxy, Nexters, and YouTube, Google. Will pay attention to us, start sending us items so we can send them to you. Till we see each other tomorrow, hope you have a great night. Well, at least try to, after hearing about the exorcist. Not the exorcism, but the abductions. And we'll see each other tomorrow for more from day 1. Good night, everybody.